So, welcome to the show today. I'm very excited today. I have Anton Golub on the show. He is the co-founder and CEO of Lykke, and I'm very excited to hear your story and more about where you guys are heading. You just mentioned before that you're moving space, so you're sitting in a temporary office space because everything is exploding and expanding and going really well. You mentioned you're a irrational optimist. That's a very good thing
Yeah.
as an entrepreneur, I think. So I'm very excited to hear more about that. So tell me a bit more about who is Anton and what's the story behind Anton and what's the story behind what we got, what got you to where we are today?
Yeah. So, I would kind of say there are two different aspects of me. One is kind of revolving around my character and around my values, kind of what I believe in. And the other one, also very important aspect of my life, this is actually what I'm doing now, what I have done in the past, what I'm doing now, and kind of where I see myself going forward. So kind of if I would have to describe myself in very simple words, who am I? What do I value very highly? And with regards to that, I would kind of like to go back to when I was a child and some of the values that my father actually instilled in me. So what I was taught very early on, that it's very important for a person as a part of the community to create something and to create something of value to others. So this is actually something kind of my father has been really stressing a lot to me since I was very young. And he was also trying to demonstrate that very clearly to me in how he conducted himself in the work that he did, how he was a part of community. So actually a very important aspect of my life and kind of growing up and a part of my character is that I have a very strong desire to create value, to create something tangible, intangible. This is kind of different ways how you can see it, but something of value to others. So this is actually something that if I would have to describe myself in one sentence or in one character trait about me, and it's that I feel this burning desire to create value for others. So this is kind of like how I am as a person, really kind of as a very simple explanation. And I attribute that trait actually to my family, specifically to my father. And I'm very happy that he saw things that way. And so now kind of, I think that then brings me forward to kind of a professional part of my life, but a part of life that occupies actually my whole day and something that I'm very passionate about. And that's actually related to this new technology called the blockchain. So I kind of like to explain it. I will not kind of go into details, but it's just a new technology that I personally think will drastically change our society for the better. So this is like kind of a very straightforward explanation. How it's just a technology, people will use it. Most of the people in the future will not care about it too much. They will care about the consequences and the outcomes from this technology. And really kind of to try to explain in very, very plain terms what motivates me on a day-to-day basis. So as a part of my value system is that I like to create things for others. And what it is that I'm trying to do now for the last 5 years, but going forward, is that actually kind of the reference comes from the internet, So if you just kind of boil down internet to a very, very basic explanation, is that in my view, internet brought democracy into exchanging information. So this is like one sentence description of what internet in the end did. And I'll give a very straightforward example. So my father, who is a 67-year-old retired veterinarian who likes to walk his dogs and hike, and hike together with the dog. If he wants to find out something about this new technology called the blockchain, he will go on the internet and he will type in blockchain. And when he presses enter, or when he kind of does the search, he will see the same information as Elon Musk. So Elon Musk is the most famous person now on the planet, one of the richest, the wealthiest person on the planet. And if you just kind of disregard the geographical differences, my father is in Croatia, somewhere in the mountains, and Elon Musk is in Silicon Valley or in San Francisco or in US. If you think about it, my father and Elon Musk get the same information on the internet when they search about the blockchain. And this is like, imagine you set something like that in the 80s. So when the whole thing started, you came to people and said, listen, the richest person on the planet and Anton's retired father will have same access to information. It's democracy in accessing information. This would be completely mind-blowing as a philosophical statement. So now I move towards the blockchain. Blockchain is a technology that will underpin kind of like our society and a lot of things around it going forward. But the end vision of the blockchain, what drives me every day, why I work on this, is that I want to be part of this movement, community that will bring democracy in finance. So I want that in, hopefully 10 years, but maybe, not 10 years, maybe 20, 30 years, that my father, a retired veterinarian with his dog who likes hiking, has the same power as Jamie Dimon, who's the CEO of JP Morgan, which is the largest bank on the planet. So this is like a one-word statement. What is it all about? Why are we doing it? And this is the end vision, and this is what occupies me on a day-to-day basis. There is too much work on the blockchain side, so that's why I work a lot, and the whole group around me works a lot. But this is actually the end vision, and this is what drives me every day professionally. And so I kind of have to thank my father, first of all, because he's instilled these values to me, but also because I'm now working for him. So he has democracy in finance one day, if we're lucky. So this is kind of a short explanation who I am and what I'm all about.
Now, I love what you just dove into, because it's very deep. It's not, shallow. It's very, very deep and straight, from the beginning. I want to take a step even further. There's two things that came out of this which have a strong position there. One is finance, and the other one is democracy. Talk to me about those two things. First of all, where do they come from? I mean, is it finance? Is a children's passion of yours, or like, where does that come from? Like finance and democracy, and why do you believe that these two need to marry in the very near future?
Yes. So, with regards to finance, like I have to be very, very honest. I never thought I would be doing that. So a step back, I studied mathematics in university. So I was very passionate about the mathematics. I love theory. I love not the numbers, but I love the theory. And I was very naive, very immature. So I said I will do mathematics forever. And theory is the best, and everything practical is for people who are just not good enough in math. So if you're really good, then you do theory. If you're not so good, if you're just a bit below, then you do, something in real life. So that's how immature and how naive I was actually, and how little I understood kind of about life, what's important and what's not. And so this was actually how it was. And I was very passionate about theory, mathematical theory. But one day a person actually came to university and he presented kind of his thoughts. And what he did actually, he was a mathematician who kind of, his life took him to finance. And he was working actively in finance for many years at a famous company. And he gave the talk. I told myself, I have no clue what this guy is talking about, but it sounds awesome. And I want to do that. So then I kind of redirected my path at the university. I still love the theory, so I'm sticking with that. I will end this, but in parallel, I want to do everything finance related. So kind of was my, I dipped my toe into the water that way towards finance. And this is actually how I got involved. And then it was just pure luck later on. I can go into details like why I got involved in the blockchain. But democracy, now this is kind of an interesting story that goes back to my childhood. Is actually Croatia was one of federal states of Yugoslavia. And Yugoslavia was a dictatorship, actually. I mean, kind of a very mild version of dictatorship, but it was a dictatorship. And I kind of always remembered that my parents were not brainwashed that it's normal to have options, that it's normal to have choices. I remember when I was young, maybe that's not the same situation in Switzerland, but in Croatia, you had a chocolate. So if you wanted the chocolate, you got the chocolate. There was one thing and everybody got the chocolate, So I'm giving an illustration, but it really was like that. If you wanted something, there was it, and there was no other choices. And I'm not saying it was a good or bad, and because life goes on and societies have to move on, and so everything was normal, but there was no choice actually. And when you got that choice on rare occasions, if you didn't take it and if you didn't act the right way, I mean, the consequences were really immense. And they were very, 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 I mean, it was just a very difficult period to live in. And I just kind of remember that. And for me, actually, personally, when there were kind of things evolved, there was actually a long war in Croatia, in actually the whole region. And people, and my father went to war actually to have democracy. I mean, if you can imagine. So I didn't see him actually for quite a long time because he put his life at stake to provide his children, not necessarily exclusively democracy, but actually have to the opportunity that they do whatever they want, what they please and what they think is best for them. So this was just kind of how I saw things at the beginning. And democracy was something very new for me and for the whole society, not just for me. And but I just think democracy is kind of the outcome of competitiveness and having choices. And then you just kind of pick what you think is best for you. And so this is kind of on a philosophical level why I think democracy is important. It's just, I am not saying that one is better than the other. Maybe democracy is better in certain situations, but then dictatorships are actually better in another one. It could be the case. But having that option to decide what you want to do, I think it's quite powerful. So why not then focus my life on two very important things that I like, so making my father happy and, kind of continuing on his legacy in terms of fighting for democracy. So this is how I actually see it.
I love this. I mean, it's incredibly it's incredible to see like how strong and how focused you are on and how values driven you are in everything. You talk about the value of creation, the value of, value for others, right? You talked about the value of democracy, about, of choices and all these kinds of things. And it's all built into the bigger picture of what you're pursuing. And let's maybe start there now. 5 years ago, everything started with Lykke. Today, it's different than 5 years ago. So tell me a bit more about, maybe just quickly to talk about the present right now. So 5 years ago, you guys started basically officially. Where are you guys at today? And then let's dive into the story.
Yeah. So for full transparency, so I'm not making short promises, that we are really, really at the beginning. And kind of, if I have to kind of provide an analogy for that, what does it mean? Imagine internet, not in 92, but in 82. Imagine internet in 82 basically didn't exist, So this is where we are today with this new technology that I'm focused on. So there is so much work that I personally think, it's just really a lot of work. And we are really, really at the beginning, and all the hype you kind of might hear about it is just, there's so much work to be done that I cannot even explain. So kind of, this is, long story short, is that yes, as a company, we grew up a lot, and it's been 5 years. I was just yesterday called a crypto dinosaur. So imagine a 32-year-old person was called a crypto dinosaur. I was never offended so much in my life. So, but that's the reality. I'm the old guy in something that's actually very, very young and immature. So it's like a little baby, and it needs to grow, it needs to evolve. So we're just taking it from there. And with regards to how I got involved, I think it's a hilarious story, but I'll kind of backtrack. I met my partner, Richard Olson, in 2010, actually first for an internship. And it was actually a very funny story. I came for an internship. On the first day, for lunch, I got my croissant and my yogurt, and I sit at the table. And he comes over next to me and he tells me directly, he says, "Anton, the financial system is completely broken. Nothing works there. We completely have to change it. The settlement system doesn't work. We have a lot of work to do, and we have to change everything." And I was like 22, 23. I was thinking, why is this guy talking to me? And what the hell is settlement, So this was my introduction to the whole story. But it was very interesting. I will try to explain what he was doing at that moment. He was trying to brainwash me to actually have this passion that, together with him, one day we would go on a venture to actually really change and redesign the financial system. So imagine, this is the first interaction I had with Richard, was me telling him, he was telling me that the financial system is broken and we need to change how the settlement works. And I was like, what is this guy talking about? But that was, kind of one stage. I then finished my internship. I ventured then, I went to actually UK, kind of spend some time there, and then actually joined him in 2012. He was actually running a hedge fund. So for full transparency, he was running a hedge fund, and I joined his hedge fund as a high frequency trader. So that was kind of the madness in 2012. And I actually specifically remember the day I kind of first heard about what is blockchain all about. When it was a boring day, I remember it was autumn, boring day, raining, like literally nothing happening. I'm doing like my programming, the trading strategies. And he calls me and he says, Anton, all of the stuff I have been terrorizing you for the last couple of years, there's a solution, we can solve it. And the funny thing is the technology already exists. This was actually, and then he mentioned, have you heard about Bitcoin? I said, yeah, I kind of know about it a little bit. He said, forget about this. This is not important. There is something in the background called the blockchain that's very, very important. And that can really redesign, reshape the whole financial system and then consequently the whole society. And then he explained to me kind of what it is. I knew due to a learning process with Richard, I learned a lot about how the financial system works, like the stuff in the background, the plumbing. And then when he was explaining to me what's the blockchain, I realized that after 2 hours, I was like, this is just a settlement. This is the stuff. I knew a better version of the blockchain to me. And then kind of in 2013, it took off. It was a very funny situation. You had like, I know maybe Richard will see this interview at one point, but it was like a 27-year-old guy and, really, really old guy, gray guy, going around telling people there is this amazing thing called the blockchain in 2013. You can imagine people were looking at us like we were completely insane. But that was the introduction, So it started very humble, and then it kind of grew, and now I'm not talking about us only. Actually, the community grew really a lot because it's about the community. It's creating value for the community. So community is actually now massive relative to when we started. But to now wrap up the story, the community is still tiny, like super small compared to where it will be in 10, 15 years. This is kind of it.
This is a great insight in terms of, also what I'm really impressed about is like you immediately start with talking about the community. At the center of everything is the community. And it's not, there's not too many people around who really understand that. Literally everything that is built today is about the community, because if you don't start there, well, you're doomed to fail. It's everything, in the startup world, everything talks about MVPs and everybody, all when it comes to, customer centric and everything, basically we're talking about this, but in a much deeper way, because we can talk about, customer avatars and quantitative research and all these kinds of things. Or we can talk about a community. And when we talk about a community, suddenly we're part of a community and we're no longer them and us and these kinds of things, but suddenly it's, well, we're part of the community and we're creating for the community. We're part of it, and that's also part of why we create for the community. And it's so beautiful to see your perspective about these kinds of things, that you focus on the community first and then you're building for the community versus, let's just do whatever the hell we think is best and then see if somebody wants it or if there's a community for it or whatever. But you're creating at the heart, at the pulse of the community. And I think that is very, very wonderful to see. So talking about the story of Lykke, 5 years, you guys had an incredible growth period. Insanity every day, I can imagine. So tell me a bit more about this journey that you were on over the past 5 years. There's a couple of criteria there. One is it is an emerging technology, which is always like at the cutting edge. It's always leapfrogging. It's always at the cutting edge where you need to educate, and it's just about nobody really understands what the hell you're talking about when you talk about what you're doing, and all these kinds of issues, right, that come built into what you're doing. Issues. It's just challenges that come with what you're doing, what every entrepreneur today is doing at the cutting edge. So talk to me a bit more about some of the experiences that you had over the past 5 years, some of the the challenges you've dealt with, and some of the key lessons that you learned along the way from a really practical perspective.
Yeah. So, I mean, I would kind of say one interesting thing with regarding kind of also to kind of understand how things can be very spontaneous, but somehow if you listen to the signs, you know, from the people, how you can do things a bit clever, you know. So actually, when we started very early on, I mean, to be honest, literally nobody had any clue what, you know, we were talking about. And it's normal. I mean, I'm not kind of trying to, it's just normal. When you start something, it's early and people just don't have the interest because it's just too early, you know. And to kind of explain this, how spontaneous things were actually, is that kind of we had a very humble period where it was just a small group of people, really, really small. When I say that, it was 2, 3, max 4 people, you know, for actually a year and a half, it was a period like that. And the whole question was always, let's start, but let's not be too early, because when you're too early, it can be very painful. And then we learned that when we implemented technology, we learned that very, very vividly. But to give you like impression, what made us kind of say, let's do this now very, very strongly, is that, you know, you go around and you talk about this amazing technology, nobody has any clue what you're talking about. Like very few understand. And I literally remember the moment when we decided, let's go very, very strong, and let's start building this technology, you know, ground up, but really, really intensively. And it was like some cocktail party. Now this, I have to give a step back, is like, Richard and myself would never go to this cocktail parties, like zero. This would not happen in real life, but I don't know, like, why is it that we were there? So, but anyway, long story short, this is not our environment, so full transparency, but somehow we were there. Okay. And, you know, kind of, we were thinking, it's so early, you know, go around, we talk, nobody has any idea. And it's very hard to convince people, and there's a lot of challenges, and how do we do it? And there was something very interesting that happened at some point. You know, we were kind of standing there and just kind of being there, not doing anything too much, to be honest. And then there was this guy literally behind us. He was like, he had 2 glasses of champagne, so a bit more, you know, happier. And kind of, he said quite loudly, he said, have you heard about this thing called the blockchain? It's amazing. It's the next great thing. It's so awesome. There you have a Bitcoin also on top of it, and you can buy and sell, and the price goes up and it goes down. It's amazing. And you have this mining. It's going to change everything. This is so amazing. You know, he was very enthusiastic. And this was actually the first time that we heard someone else saying, now maybe not in a different context, but someone else actually saying it. And I remember it was like, you would think that we would be very rational and very analytic, how we would decide, you know, when to be very intense in our growth. But actually it was that moment where we said, now is the right time. Because you had one guy somewhere, we literally look at each other, Richard and myself, said, this is impossible that somebody else is talking about this in this enthusiasm. And then we literally said, now is the time to go. So actually, if you can kind of think about it, now I'm actually trying to kind of learn, say the lessons that I learned is that to know if something is right or wrong or how to do it, you need to listen to others actually. Because other people will actually tell you everything if you're too early or you're not early. So this was actually kind of our motivation why to kind of start very strong, and then it kind of took off. It was actually a very, very good moment, you know, so we progressed very fast, but then we also burned our fingers on many different occasions. So Richard he has this one thing that he likes to say that it's very, very motivating. So if we kind of gathered together and we look at some technology that is something we need to implement, we would say, come on, this will never work. We know it, we see it, this will never work. And his favorite sentence is, just don't worry, do it. And so there's a lot of things that we were very kind of pioneering in our work. And then we implemented it on this, don't worry, just do it. And then you completely burn your fingers because you do it and then you're just too early. And the technology is immature, and then you kind of, you get all the worst stories or the worst cars. You learn everything, but it's just, you know, you learn how it doesn't work. So we actually had many occasions like this, you know. Sometimes we will be very right in terms of how we would approach things, and somehow kind of so there will be a very small group of things when we did right, and then everything else we did wrong. So just for full transparency is that my experience, you know, kind of, if you ask me how did it play out, what I learned the most was actually, it's the war stories. My experience, why I think my insights are valuable is because I just don't know how things don't work. And, this is something that I can pass actually to others. So people come very often. They come very often to the crypto dinosaur, the blockchain dinosaur, and then they ask for opinion, like, what do you think about this? And then I can say, oh, this will not work. We tried it. It's horrible. Don't do it. So hopefully they do it a better way or they do something else. So this is actually something that I think was very valuable to me, is that the war stories and the failures, which I had as much as you can imagine, this is actually what you experience on a daily basis. So on a daily basis, you fail nonstop. And then you have a couple of occasions when you do things right, which for me, if you ask me 5-6 years ago, I would never tell you that. I would always think that the life is just you succeed. And you hear because you hear great stories. You hear Elon Musk did this amazing thing, but you don't hear the failures that are part of everyday life that nobody talks about because nobody wants to hear about failure. I also don't want to hear about failure. But this is something that's been very interesting for me and a part of growing up.
I love this. I mean, I have so much on your page when it comes to successes and failures. I mean, everybody only talks about successes because it's easy to talk to them about, right? There's no, nothing can hurt you when you talk about successes, but when you talk about failures, suddenly you're vulnerable. And, you have to open up and you have to open your curtain and all these kinds of things, right? So it's more difficult, but it's much, much more valuable because, yes, best practices in the sense of successes are great, but best practices in the sense of failures are better because then you know what not to do, because then you can pick the 1% that you actually should be doing versus, trying the 99% that somebody already, did and it didn't work and it took them 5 years to understand that it doesn't work. Well, there we go, 5 years earned back, which is pretty valuable in today's day and age, especially. So this is amazing. And let's maybe switch a little bit into today and into the future, because, one thing is I want to hear a bit more about like what you feel is most exciting right now that, you're currently working on, you're currently expanding in, but also talk to me a little bit about blockchain and the actual impact. You're so right. It's a bit like, artificial intelligence. It's such a buzzword that nobody really knows what it is because there probably is a Wikipedia definition, but still everybody has an entirely different view of what it is, what it could be, because it's so fresh. And also, I think it's much, much more valuable instead of saying what the actual thing is, like when you said, like what you said in the beginning, then what it actually can do and what it does and what the impact is. So talk to me a bit about the financial system and the impact of blockchain and where you see this thing in 5-10 years to be, hopefully.
Mm-hmm. So I'll kind of first mention what I'm doing now at the moment, and then I'll kind of venture into kind of where I see things going. And so you actually mentioned that I'm now kind of changing offices and office spaces. And that's actually because, yes, I'm in a new office. I'm actually now in Bahnhofstrasse. And there's a story behind it. Actually, we created a new venture together with my partner. So it's not me alone. That's called the Trust Square. And it's actually an accelerator incubator in Bahnhofstrasse, exclusively for crypto and blockchain companies. So if you're a crypto and blockchain companies, you can come get, an office space and get the whole community and the support. If you're not, then, you're welcome, but, we want to focus on these things. And kind of, this is something actually that I feel very passionate about, is because this was actually the first time that together with my partners, so I was not alone, I can create an ecosystem and give back. So it's actually kind of very interesting is that I personally don't feel like I was taking from the blockchain, from the crypto community in the last couple of years. But it was really like an opportunity when you say, let's create something, and it's actually just completely for the others. Because I'm the least relevant person in this whole building, because the whole point is to get other companies to come here, then you meet the people. Today I had a guest, and he was telling me what he did. And I said, we have 2 companies that do similar stuff like you. Let me go, to the floor below and I'll introduce you to everyone. And this is actually kind of very passionate about. And so, really, I'm doing something where I can give back to the community. But to be 100% transparent, I can say at 32 years old, I have a whole building in Bahnhofstrasse with crypto blockchain companies. And the building opposite to us is actually the Swiss National Bank. So you can imagine the irony. I said, I'm doing it just for the story. So I can say the story, but kind of funny story, but basically, it's a community of crypto companies. And this is something I'm very passionate about. So I repeat again, it's Trust Square, Bahnhofstrasse 3. So I hope, people will come to visit me or just kind of keep it in their mind.
I just want to jump in. I mean, I love the story behind it. I mean, literally doing it just for the story itself, I think is great because, I mean, what's a better place to disrupt the financial system than opposite of the national bank inside of the global banking city? I mean, that's the best story of all, I think.
Yes. Yeah. And it's kind of very, I mean, you said it perfectly. And what I notice is that people like anecdotes and people like stories, and they buy into the story. So when I mentioned the story, they just laughed. They said, this is crazy. I have to come and visit you. So this is actually makes my life actually a lot easier because I can just present the story. I said, this is on crypto. It's not true. I say most expensive street on the planet, next to the central bank, we have a crypto blockchain accelerator, the whole building. Amazing, so it's a great story and it makes life very easier. So this is kind of it's just, I love the story as well. And it gives me opportunity to do what I'm really passionate about. And that's actually giving back. So I'm very happy about this project. And the project will have its own life and kind of, my role there operationally is so microscopic that I don't do anything practically, but I'm part of it and an ambassador and promote it. Now, in terms of the question that you kindly asked me, kind of where do I see things going or what's happening now? I mean, I just reiterate that it's so early and that kind of it's so early that people cannot even imagine. But actually, blockchain had one success actually that happened, and that's actually through the blockchain. For the first time ever, people can very easily raise funds for their project. So these are the so-called, if you heard about it, it's called initial coin offering, and kind of they in the news a lot. But it's basically in plain language, you just use this technology to raise capital. So imagine like you have a group of people, somewhere, they can be anywhere, and using this amazing technology, they can raise capital. And I'll actually kind of take a step back to tell our story at the beginning. Is when we started, we had to raise capital the normal way. And when you do that, you realize something very quickly is that you are a slave to your community, actually. So I was talking about the community, how important it is, but I just say something now very kind of in the opposite context about it, that you become a slave to your community. And think about it, when you want to do something very new, very provocative, very disruptive, and you come to your community, the community that you are about to disrupt, and you tell them, give me funds so I can disrupt this whole thing here. And of course, I mean, you go around and you say, oh, please, can I get some funds, and people look at you and say, I'm not sure, and basically, but it's very difficult, and that's because you're literally a slave to people. I'm a slave to Zurich, actually. If I want to raise capital for my amazing idea, I'm a slave to Zurich, actually. And sometimes it's not so good, actually, when you want to be very disruptive. But imagine this, you have blockchain, which is a global technology. Anybody else, it's like internet is a global platform to exchange information. Blockchain is a global platform where you exchange assets or you exchange money, how you want. And all of a sudden, I'm not a slave to my community, the community that I want to disrupt. So I just go and say, oh, in Zurich, nobody wants to give me funds for my amazing project. I get it from a person in Asia. I get it from a person in LA. I get it from a person in Brazil, in the rainforest. I can get it from there. And this is the first time ever that you have this power. I mean, imagine we're going slowly towards this vision, but you have the power like the biggest, company on the planet that wants to raise funds. You just use this technology. You say, I have an amazing project. It's so awesome. It will disrupt everything. You make big promises, of course. And then you say, please give me funds. And people do it. If they buy into the story, which is very important, if they buy into the team, or if they just do it for random reasons, this is up to them. They can give you funds, and from all over the globe, if you can imagine it. And people have raised millions and hundreds of millions for projects they have in mind. No, maybe they're crazy projects, maybe they're not. I mean, this is a different story, but they have this opportunity. So this is actually the first success of the blockchain, raising capital through this amazing technology on a global scale. But, kind of going towards this vision of democracy in finance, I mean, there's a lot more work. So we made the first step that you can do, you can raise funds. But kind of all the other stuff or other aspects around this technology were kind of very shallow, actually. So people kind of know about the blockchain, or they know about the crypto world, to be very transparent through gambling in all of this, cryptocurrencies and crypto assets. So this is kind of, if you ask me, what do people do today? They gamble. They first invest, they provide capital, and then they get their tokens, and then they gamble in those tokens. This is the reality. But one thing was good. For the first time ever, you can raise capital on a global level. Anyone on the planet. You have the same power as the Goldman Sachs, the biggest bank, kind of in theory. So, but where things are going, I think that kind of going forward, people will start to rethink about assets on a very abstract level. And I'll make an example about that. When people think about assets, they think about stocks, bonds, currencies, commodities, whatever you want, kind of like real estate. This is what people think when they, and if you mention assets, this is what people think, or at least people who are in finance. But kind of what we realized very recently, maybe it's relevant to the context, what's happening in the background behind us, is actually the most valuable asset that each individual has. It's his own identity. So imagine, I mean, we have this privilege, we're in Switzerland, so everything works. But imagine you are actually a refugee and you land in front of this big wall, it's very, very big, and they are trying to make it bigger. And you tell them, I'm having problems. This is the same thing happened in Croatia during the war, so I've seen it, But you come in front of this wall and you tell them, I'm actually leaving my place of birth because I need help. And please, can you help me? And can you please, let me in actually to become part of the society? And maybe people are even reasonable and they say, yeah, why not? But who are you? Show me. And you tell them, well, I just left my, home of birth because of war. I do not have a passport, I do not have an ID. It's not like I can just go and provide proof that I'm a nice person. Because maybe you really are a nice person. So why not? Of course, I want to be part of a group of nice people, and I want amazing people to be part of my group. So, but you don't have anything. And they tell you, well, that's amazing, but till you get your passport and your visa and whatnot, you cannot get in. But imagine if you could actually tokenize your digital identity. You put it on this global, amazing platform. And when you show up in front of this big wall that's getting bigger, and people say, who are you? You can come in if you're a nice person. Only if you're nice, you can come in. But who are you? And you tell them, hey, it's on the blockchain. Take a look. It's me. It's Anton, I'm a great guy and I want from my community. And they take a look at the blockchain and say, yeah, this is an amazing person. Come in, we'll help you out. But so you think about it, actually, a really important asset that each of us has kind of intrinsically is your identity. So why not digitize it, put it on this blockchain, and then it's there, you cannot change it, you cannot remove it, anybody, you can access it, you can show it to other people if you want. And that's how you actually leverage your power, your identity for something good. So I think going forward, this is kind of my personal biased thoughts, what I would like to do. You kind of, why not, create an asset that's your identity, digital identity. So, yeah, go ahead.
No, this is great. It sparks a controversial question there from my side. I love this because it makes life so much easier. It makes so many things easier. The thing is, with something like that, it reminds me of electric cars, for example, right? And the car industry and the car manufacturers and everything. Even though it makes society better and everything, there is a massive lobby that works tirelessly against this movement, right? So if in this world of blockchain and digital identity, for example, there is one phrase you've said so many times is full transparency in this conversation, and I'm going there right now because full transparency requires people to be fully transparent, right? And some people, they look nice in everything that sort of like is out there in a like when they can control what's out there and what not, they look nice. But when they cannot control it, they look no longer nice. So there's a fairly sizable group of people that will probably work also tirelessly against this if that's the case. Do you think in general it's going to take longer because not because of technology advancement, but because of resistances like that? Do you think that is going to be one of the main challenges in the future, or do you think it's going to be more like educational pieces of technology, or where do you see that going?
Mm-hmm. So I mean, just to kind of say it immediately, you actually made a great point, and I mean the answer is yes. People will fight it very hard, sometimes because they have their vested interest in a different agenda, or for whatever other reason. But to be very honest, you cannot fight it. You cannot fight technology, and you cannot fight progress. Like imagine Switzerland. I'll be very provocative. Switzerland today says no more internet. You cannot use it anymore. I mean, imagine how short-sighted that would be, because imagine it's like you have this amazing technology and you say, no, you cannot use it. I mean, the country would go under basically the next day. Imagine you tell the whole country, no, you cannot use the internet because we have, I want the post office to, the people send more letters, so we're not going to let them, use email, or like as people want to use a messaging service, and you tell them, no, you need to use the email service, it kind of makes no sense. And to be very provocative, you have an example of that actually today. And that's unfortunately, in North Korea. The country says everything is under control. You have your internet is inside, and you cannot get access to information. And I will not go into details, but we see how this is going. Not very well. So it's impossible, absolutely impossible to stop it. You can resist it. And people will do that. But I think it's just more exciting to focus on the technology and what will bring, and not trying to stop it, because it will come either way. So you're literally like fighting. It's just impossible to do it. So this is kind of my short opinion. It will come, and we just have to be patient and wait.
It's a bit like fighting evolution.
Exactly. I agree with you totally. Yeah.
Yeah, no, this is great. I mean, I love these discussions because, they're very lively, and it's the same with, talking about artificial intelligence. We had a great discussion at the CEO Collaboration with Pascal Kaufman from Starmind and Mindfire about, the future of AI and basically there's certain things that are unstoppable. And yes, we have to think about how to manage things. At the end of the day, there's no way to really control anything, because let's be honest, in the world as we have it today, control is obsolete in many, many, many ways. And there is a new order, thank God, in a new way that people are leading, even on government level and all kinds of areas. It's slow, yes, because the world is a big fat tanker, but overall things change dramatically. And I'm very happy that you are driving things like that forward at the edge of that wave, because it is unstoppable. And the faster we understand what's happening, the faster we understand the cases of impact and what it really means for society, the better we understand it, I think the better, not can we control it, but the better we can guide it and direct it in certain areas that we feel as a society, as humanity at the end of the day, is beneficial for us, for the planet, for whatever we think is the right choice.
I agree totally. Yeah, I mean, this is as you mentioned very clearly, you cannot fight evolution, or it's very hard to do it. And also something very interesting you say is that it will be it's very tempting to try to guide things. And what I can just say, my humble experience, we have tried to guide kind of like the progress and how things evolve over the last 5 years. I mean, I personally, and we failed in many different ways doing that, because it's very hard to predict kind of evolution. If you could do that, then there is no evolution actually, if you could predict things. So I'm just very excited how things will evolve going forward, and hopefully they evolve, kind of in the direction that you made, because it could be very exciting and, for the good of everybody. And let's hope for that personally. I mean, I would like to see that.
Yeah, I mean, just one last comment on that. I really like this point. We had a great discussion as well on our event last week about that. And it was about basically like I'm zooming out like ways into theory, right? But like, there's this future 50 years from today where, humanity is dead and it's just robots and AI basically rule, right? And Matrix, right? There's this sort of idea there. And then there's the other side as well, where it's more like an utopia, where everything's free and everything runs very smoothly. And of course, we as humanity has a collective ego, which is good because we need to survive. At least that's what we want, right? But then the other side of the coin is like, there's the dinosaurs, which probably did really want to survive, right? But at the end of the day, certain things were inevitable as evolution took over. Going back to guiding things, you made a phenomenal point there, because yes, we can even try and probably what I try to do is say controlling is a hard word. Let's call it guidance, right? I mean, at the end of the day, it's the same thing, right? So it's maybe less harsh, but I think it's more about really letting things flow, allowing us to understand how things work. We can never predict the future. We can't really say, extinction, utopia, whatever. At the end of the day, things happen as they should from an evolutional standpoint. And I think it's more about making meaning out of what's happening right now, if we go really deep into this discussion. So this has been absolutely phenomenal. Thank you so much, Anton, for taking the time, for being on the show, sharing your wisdom, your experience, but also your view of the future and the bigger picture vision and what's behind blockchain and the impact, especially on the financial system and society. So thank you so much for being on the show. We're going to point to the resources below, so to your LinkedIn page, the company page, and things like that. So once again, thank you so much for being here, Anton.
Thank you. And as a crypto dinosaur who's trying to survive, I thank you for inviting me. And if I make it, maybe we talk again later. So thanks a lot for the opportunity to talk.